She wasn't supposed to survive. She wasn't supposed to carry this child. And yet, here she was, running, hunted, carrying a secret that could change everything. A child, half human, half Sylvarian. A miracle, a curse, something the High Council would burn the universe to erase. But they made one mistake. They thought she was alone. They thought no one would help her. They didn't count on him, a scientist, a fugitive, a man who never wanted to fight until now. And now he will stop at nothing, not to destroy the future, but to protect it. Because what grows inside her, it's more than a child. It's the beginning of something new. And the galaxy is not ready for what comes next. Elias Carter had seen many strange things in his years as a genetic scientist working for the Intergalactic Research Alliance, but nothing prepared him for her. She arrived unannounced, a ghost slipping through the neon-lit corridors of the orbital station, draped in a dark cloak that barely concealed her silver-touched skin and radiant violet eyes. Her presence was wrong, not because she was alien, but because she didn't belong here. Sylvarians never came to human colonies. They were a reclusive, almost mythical species, beautiful, elusive, unreachable. And yet, here she was, standing in his lab, alone. Dr. Carter, her voice was like silk, but there was urgency in it, a trembling note that sent a shiver down his spine. "That depends," Elias said, arms crossed. "Who's asking?" She lowered her hood and time itself seemed to slow. Her pale lavender skin shimmered, catching the cold fluorescence of the lab lights. Faint bioluminescent veins pulsed beneath her skin, glowing softly like stars trapped beneath the surface. And then, there was her stomach. She was pregnant. Elias swallowed, his scientist's mind racing. That should be impossible. "Who are you?" he asked more cautiously this time. "My name is Lirae," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I need your help. A biological mystery." Elias hesitated only a second before guiding her deeper into his lab. If she was hiding, it meant someone was looking for her. And if the Sylvarians were involved, that meant danger. Lirae sat on the examination table, her hands trembling slightly as she pressed them against her abdomen. "I don't have much time," she whispered. Elias pulled up a medical scanner, his fingers moving swiftly across the console. He studied her vitals. Heart rate accelerated, stress levels through the roof. But that wasn't what made him freeze. Her genetic makeup. It wasn't just Sylvarian. He stared at the results flashing on the screen, his pulse quickening. This is human DNA." Lirae exhaled sharply as if she had been holding her breath. "I know," she said. "That's why I came to you." Elias shook his head, unable to process what he was seeing. "It's impossible. Sylvarians and humans don't share enough genetic compatibility to—" "I'm proof that it's possible," she interrupted. "But it wasn't natural. I was part of an experiment, one that I didn't agree to." Elias' stomach twisted. He had heard whispers about cross-species genetic manipulation before, but nothing had ever been confirmed. Nothing like this. "Who did this to you?" Lirae hesitated, her violet eyes flickering with something between fear and determination. "The Sylvarian High Council." Elias's breath caught in his throat. That was a death sentence. The consequences of a forbidden child. Lirae's hands trembled as she reached for his wrist, clutching it with surprising strength. "They never meant for me to survive, Dr. Carter," she said, her voice urgent. "They see this child as an abomination, a mistake, something that shouldn't exist." Elias stared at her, disbelief and horror warring inside him. "They want to terminate the pregnancy," she continued, her voice breaking. "And if I resist, they will erase me, completely." Elias had seen firsthand how brutal Sylvarian law could be. The council was absolute. If they had ordered her death, there would be no negotiations. His fingers clenched into fists. "They're hunting you," he said, more a statement than a question. Lirae nodded. "And they won't stop until I'm gone." Elias let out a slow breath, his mind working rapidly. If the Sylvarians had already dispatched their enforcers, That meant she was running on borrowed time. She shouldn't have come here. The hum of the ship's engines vibrated beneath Elias Carter's feet as he worked furiously at the navigation console. His fingers flew across the glowing interface, setting a course far from the prying eyes of the Sylvarian authorities. Lirae stood behind him, her arms wrapped around herself as if trying to make herself smaller. The tension in the room was thick, charged with unspoken fears and the weight of an impossible reality. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice quieter than before. Elias didn't turn, his jaw tightening as he locked in the coordinates. "There's a research outpost on Theta 9, he said. "It's off-grid, hidden. If we get there before they track your signal, we might have a chance." Lirae exhaled a shaky breath. "And what if they've already found us?" Elias finally turned to her, studying the fear in her violet eyes. "Then," he said, "we pray they don't shoot first. A dangerous escape." Elias slid into the pilot's seat, pulling the Nova-class cruiser into a steep ascent. The small vessel shuddered as it broke free from the orbital station's docking bay, plunging into the endless abyss of space. For a moment there was silence, just the hum of the ship, the distant glow of stars, and the feeling of running from something far bigger than themselves. Lirae sat next to him, her hands gripping the armrest tightly. "You're a scientist," she said, glancing at him. "Not a pilot," Elias smirked. "Good thing I multitask." Then the alarm blared. His stomach dropped as red warning lights flashed across the console. An incoming transmission. Elias exchanged a look with Lirae before hesitantly opening the channel. A deep, distorted voice crackled over the comms. "Unregistered vessel. This is the Sylvarian Enforcement Fleet. Stand down immediately. Disable your engines and prepare for boarding." Lirae's breath caught. "They found us." Elias cursed under his breath. They were fast. Too fast. "Are they tracking you?" he asked, glancing at her. "Do you have a beacon implanted?" Lirae's hands clenched into fists. I don't know. I never checked." Elias gritted his teeth. "No time to scan. No time to think." "We don't have weapons," Lirae whispered. "We can't fight them." Elias's gaze darkened. "No," he said, "but we can outrun them." The chase. The ship jolted forward as Elias throttled the engines to maximum. A burst of blue fire erupted from the thrusters, sending them hurtling through the void at breakneck speed. Behind them, the Sylvarian warships loomed like silent specters, their sleek black hulls gliding through the darkness with terrifying precision. "They're gaining." Elias ignored the warning. "I know." Lirae clutched the seat as the ship twisted through a dense asteroid belt, skimming dangerously close to jagged rocks the size of cities. The warships followed. Then, a single blast. A streak of golden plasma seared past them, grazing the side of the hull. The ship trembled. "Shields at 40%, Lirae gasped, eyes wide. Another shot, closer this time. "We can't take another hit!" Elias's mind raced. He scanned the star map, searching for anything, anywhere they could hide. And then he saw it, a wormhole. Through the unknown, Elias punched in the trajectory, his fingers moving faster than thought. "Hold on," he warned. The ship twisted sharply, its nose dipping straight into the swirling vortex of the wormhole. Lirae screamed as gravity folded around them. The universe blinked. And then, silence. Elias gasped as the ship lurched back into normal space. The controls flickered, stabilizing. The Sylvarian ships? Gone. They had escaped. Barely. Lirae exhaled shakily, pressing a trembling hand against her chest. I thought we were dead." Elias let out a breathless laugh, running a hand through his hair. "Not today." Lirae swallowed. They weren't safe yet, but for now, they had a chance, and that was enough. "I came to you because I read your research, Elias. You believe in genetic harmony between species. You believe in a future where humans and other races can exist as equals, not as subjects and experiments." She took his hand in hers, her skin unnaturally warm. "I need you to help me save my child," she whispered. "I need you to help me survive." Elias met her gaze, and for the first time, he saw not an experiment, not a mystery to solve, but a woman caught between two worlds, fighting for her right to exist. A woman who had been used and discarded. A woman who was asking him for the one thing she had never been given, a choice, and he had already made his. Elias pulled away, his jaw tightening. "If you stay here, they'll find you," he said. "We need to leave. Now." Lirae blinked, startled. "You mean?" Elias grabbed his data pad, already calculating their escape route. "If they think they can erase you," he muttered, "they're going to have to go through me first." And with that, the scientist and the runaway became fugitives. Somewhere in the cold void of space, the hunt had already begun. The surface of exile. The ship entered the exomoon's thin atmosphere with a shaky descent, landing in a desolate expanse of jagged black rocks and misty blue fog. It was cold, not freezing, but enough for Elias to feel a chill in his bones as he stepped onto the surface. Lirae followed, wrapping herself in a thin cloak. Her glowing skin cast an eerie shimmer in the dim light. Elias kneeled, pressing a scanner to the ground. No oxygen, barely any radiation. It's habitable enough. Lirae sighed. "I suppose that's the best we can hope for." They set up a temporary shelter, a collapsible energy dome from the ship's emergency supplies. Inside, soft lights flickered on, illuminating the small space. Finally, Elias collapsed onto a storage crate, exhaustion catching up to him. Lirae stood by the entrance, her arms wrapped around herself, staring into the endless dark. "You okay?" Elias asked. She didn't answer right away. Then in a quiet voice, "I don't know." Elias studied her. She looked so small, so lost. Not the mysterious Sylvarian woman who had walked into his lab, but someone vulnerable. "Lirae," he said gently, "I need you to tell me the truth." She turned, her expression unreadable. "What truth? Why did you really come to me?" Elias leaned forward. "Why me? Out of all the geneticists in the galaxy?" She hesitated, and for the first time he saw fear in her eyes. "Because," she whispered, "you're the only one who might understand. A revelation that changes everything." Lirae walked toward him, kneeling in front of him. "I didn't just escape, Elias," she murmured. "I stole something." Elias's breath caught. "What?" She reached into the folds of her cloak and produced a small, glowing vial. It pulsed with soft, golden light, casting strange shadows on her face. "This," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "is the last of its kind." Elias stared. "What is it?" Lirae swallowed hard. "It's not just my child, Elias. It's the first successful hybrid embryo. The only one that lived." Elias felt like the ground had vanished beneath him. This is what the Council wanted to destroy?" Lirae nodded. Elias looked at the vial in stunned silence. A child that was neither fully human nor fully Sylvarian. A child that could change everything. And if the Sylvarian authorities knew it still existed, they would never stop hunting them. Lirae gazed up at him, her voice trembling. "I didn't just come to you for help, Elias. I came because you're the only one who can save it." The realization settled deep in his bones. This wasn't just about running anymore. This was a fight for the future of two species. The golden vial pulsed between Lirae's fingers, its soft glow illuminating her trembling hands. Elias couldn't take his eyes off it. This wasn't just an embryo, it was proof. Proof that humanity and the Sylvarians weren't as different as the Council wanted them to believe. Proof that evolution was possible, and proof that somewhere deep in their genetic codes, they were meant to intertwine. But it also meant one thing. They were in more danger than he had ever imagined. Elias exhaled, his fingers tightening into a fist. "How long before they find us?" Lirae shook her head. "I don't know." She was still kneeling before him, vulnerable in a way he had never seen before. Her entire life had been a fight for survival. Now she was placing the last of her hope into his hands, and he didn't know if he was strong enough to hold it. The science behind the miracle. Elias carefully took the vial from her hands, setting it onto the holoscanner. Lines of genetic data unfurled in shimmering holographic blue. revealing strands of DNA Elias had never seen before. His breath caught in his throat. This isn't just human and Sylvarian DNA. Lirae stiffened. What do you mean? Elias zoomed in on the sequence. There, woven into the genetic structure, was something else. Something older. He felt a cold chill creep up his spine. This is, pre-extinction genetic coding, he muttered. A third species. Lirae's violet eyes widened. That's impossible. Elias turned to her. Did the council ever tell you what they were trying to create? She swallowed. They told me that I was a bridge. Elias's heart pounded. A bridge to what? The enemy is closer than they think. The ship's warning alarm suddenly blared to life. Lirae flinched. Elias shot up from his chair, rushing to the console. An unidentified vessel had just entered the moon's orbit. Lirae's breath hitched. They found us. Elias's mind raced. It was too soon. They had barely gotten a few hours of rest. The Sylvarians couldn't have tracked them so quickly, unless they had help. His stomach twisted. Someone had betrayed them. He grabbed Lirae's wrist, his voice urgent. We have to move, now. She didn't argue. She just ran, a desperate escape. The ship's engines roared to life as Elias launched them off the exomoon's surface. The enemy vessel was closing in fast. Elias gritted his teeth. Hold on! He twisted the ship's controls, sending them into a rapid barrel roll, just as a plasma blast ripped past their hull. Lirae gasped, gripping the seat. They're shooting to kill! Elias's fingers flew over the controls. Then let's make it hard for them. He yanked the ship into a sharp vertical climb, weaving through a dense asteroid cluster in the system's outer rim. The enemy followed, and then a voice came through the comms, cold, commanding, and terrifyingly familiar. You have something that belongs to us, Dr. Carter. Lirae's blood went cold. It was the voice of the High Council. The voice over the comms sent an ice-cold shiver down Elias's spine. You have something that belongs to us, Dr. Carter. Lirae's grip on the seat tightened. Her violet eyes locked onto Elias's. They found them. Elias's fingers hovered over the controls, his mind racing. The High Council itself had sent this transmission. Not a fleet commander, not an enforcer. This was personal. He reached for the comms panel, voice steady. If you mean Lirae, I'm afraid she's not yours to own. A pause, then laughter, cold, hollow, filled with the kind of amusement that made Elias's stomach turn. You misunderstand, Doctor. We never claimed her. She was an unfortunate mistake. But what she carries, that is ours. Elias clenched his jaw. They meant the child, the hybrid embryo. Lirae swallowed hard, her entire body trembling. They know, she whispered. Elias met her gaze. They always knew. Revealing the truth, the High Council's voice returned, smooth as silk. Surrender the specimen, Dr. Carter. We are willing to negotiate your survival. Elias exhaled slowly. And what about her? Silence. Lirae flinched. Elias's knuckles went white against the control panel. He already knew the answer. The Council never left loose ends. His voice was steel when he responded. Then my answer is no. A pause, then, unfortunate. The comms went dead. A second later, missile lock warning. A battle in the stars. The enemy ship fired. The entire vessel lurched as the explosion rocked them from behind. Shields at 30%, Lirae gasped, her hands gripping the seat. Elias cursed under his breath. They weren't in a warship. This was a research vessel, a floating lab. They weren't built for a fight, but if they didn't do something now, they'd be nothing but debris in the void. Hold on! He twisted the ship into a nosedive, skimming dangerously close to the asteroid field below. Lirae let out a breathless scream as another missile exploded just above them, sending a wave of fire through space. They're closing in! Elias's mind worked at light speed. They couldn't outrun them. They couldn't fight them. But maybe they could outthink them. His eyes flicked to the star maps. There, a collapsing neutron field. Deadly, chaotic, and impossible to navigate, unless you were desperate. Lirae, brace yourself. Her eyes widened. What are you? Elias threw the ship straight into the neutron storm. Into the eye of chaos, alarms screamed. Static swallowed their sensors. Gravity bent around them, warping reality itself. Elias gritted his teeth, fighting against the pull of the storm. One wrong move, and they'd be crushed into atoms. The enemy ship hesitated for just a second. That was all they needed. Elias punched the afterburners, sending them deeper into the storm. The enemy ship, too large, too slow, couldn't follow. And then, silence. No alarms. No chasing warships. Just emptiness. Elias exhaled a shaky breath. We made it. Lirae slumped back, gasping. That was insane. Elias gave a breathless laugh. Yeah, but it worked. Then, her expression darkened. They won't stop, Elias, she whispered. They will chase us to the ends of the universe. Elias turned to her, his voice firm. Then we make sure we're ready for them. The hum of the ship's damaged engines was the only sound filling the cockpit. They had escaped, for now. Elias adjusted their trajectory, taking them deeper into the uncharted region of space. The neutron storm had bought them time, but not safety. Lirae sat beside him, her arms wrapped around herself. Her violet eyes flickered with exhaustion, fear, and something else. Determination. They won't stop, she murmured. You know that. Elias sighed, running a hand through his hair. Yeah. He stared at the star map, possibilities unfolding before him like an intricate puzzle. Where do you go when the most powerful empire in the galaxy is hunting you? Then, an idea. He turned to Lirae. There's one place they won't follow us. Her gaze snapped to his. Where? Elias's fingers hovered over a point on the map, a ghost system, abandoned centuries ago. Valros 9. Lirae's breath caught. That's a death zone. Elias smirked. Exactly. A desperate gamble. Valros 9 was an ancient graveyard, a system swallowed by radiation storms, its planets reduced to ruins of a forgotten empire. No one dared venture there, not even the Sylvarians, which meant it was the perfect hiding place. Lirae studied the map, her lips pressing into a thin line. It's dangerous. Elias met her gaze. So is staying here. For a moment, she said nothing. Then with a slow exhale, she nodded. Set the course. Elias punched in the coordinates. The ship trembled as it engaged hyperwarp, propelling them into the unknown. There was no turning back now. Whispers of the past hours later, Valros 9 loomed before them. A dead world, a place where stars had long since burned out, leaving behind a cold, silent void. The ship pierced through the thick clouds, landing on a barren plateau, overlooking the remnants of a forgotten civilization. Towering spires crumbled beneath the weight of time. Strange glowing ruins pulsed faintly, as if still holding on to the last echoes of their creators. Lirae stepped onto the surface, shivering against the eerie stillness. Elias followed, gripping his blaster, just in case. This place, Lirae whispered, it feels wrong. Elias felt it too, not fear, but something else. Like the ghosts of this world were watching them, waiting. Let's find shelter, he muttered, before we find out what's still alive here. The forgotten threat. As they explored the ruins, something shifted in the darkness. A sound, low, guttural, inhuman. Elias froze. Did you hear that? Lirae's breath hitched. She did. Then, movement. Shadows slithered between the ruins, watching them with glowing, predatory eyes. Elias slowly raised his weapon. They weren't alone. Lirae's fingers tightened around the vial hidden beneath her cloak. They had escaped the Sylvarians, but they had walked straight into something far worse. The ruins of Valros 9 were supposed to be abandoned, but the things watching them from the shadows, they were alive. Elias gripped his blaster, heart pounding in his chest. Lirae stepped closer to him, her glowing skin dimming instinctively, a survival response. The creatures didn't attack, not yet. They simply watched. Then, a voice, not spoken, not whispered, but inside Elias's mind. You carry the key, but do you know what it unlocks? The truth about the hybrid. Elias staggered back, his breath catching. He looked at Lirae, but she shook her head. She hadn't heard it. This was directed at him. Then the shadows moved. A figure emerged, tall, draped in something that looked like metal and flesh fused together. It was alien, ancient, and terrifyingly familiar. Elias had seen remnants of this species before, in classified files and forbidden archives. They were supposed to be extinct, but they weren't. And now they wanted something from him. An impossible decision. The being stepped forward, golden eyes locking onto Elias's. That which you protect does not belong to you. Elias's breath hitched, the embryo. Lirae instinctively pressed a hand to her cloak, where the vial was hidden. She understood too. These creatures, they knew about the hybrid, and they wanted it. But why? Elias steadied himself, forcing his voice to remain calm. What do you mean? The being tilted its head. You are playing with forces beyond your comprehension. The child is not yours to shape. Lirae stiffened. And who does it belong to? The being's golden eyes flickered. To the past, and to the end of everything. The enemy is already here before Elias could respond. A distant explosion shook the ruins. He turned sharply. Flames erupted in the distance. Above them, piercing through the clouds, Sylvarian warships. They had found them. Lirae grabbed Elias's wrist. We have to run. But the ancient being, it did not move. It simply watched the sky burn, its expression unreadable. Then it looked back at Elias, and for the first time, he saw something in its eyes. Not hostility, not threat, but pity. Now, you will understand. And then, the war began. The sky erupted into chaos. Sylvarian warships descended from orbit, their engines roaring as drones and enforcers flooded the ruins. Plasma bolts rained down, turning ancient stone to molten slag. Lirae grabbed Elias's arm. We need to go, now! But the ancient being didn't flinch. It simply watched, unmoving, as the war unfolded. Elias turned back to it, his voice urgent. If you know what's coming, then help us. For the first time, it smiled, not with kindness, but with understanding. You do not yet see the truth, but you will. And then, it vanished. The hybrid awakens. Lirae yanked Elias back as an explosion shattered the ground where he stood. They ran, through collapsing ruins, past the screams of dying soldiers, dodging the relentless fire of Sylvarian drones. But Elias felt it, something changing. Lirae clutched her cloak tightly as she ran. The vial inside was glowing. The embryo, it pulsed with golden light, the energy within it stirring. Elias's stomach twisted. It was reacting to something. Or worse, it was waking up. A choice that will change everything. They reached the edge of the ruins, where their ship waited, damaged but still functional. But the moment they stepped onto the loading ramp, a plasma shot hit the ground before them. A Sylvarian commander stood there, weapon drawn. Dr. Carter, she said coldly, step away from the hybrid. Lirae tightened her grip on the vial. Never. The commander's gaze darkened. You don't understand what you're carrying. That child is not a miracle. It is a weapon. Elias's breath hitched. A weapon? His mind raced. Was that what the ancient being had tried to warn them about? Had the council been trying to stop something? Or had they created something they feared? Lirae took a slow step back toward the ship. I won't let you take it, she whispered. The commander's jaw clenched. You don't have a choice. And then she fired. The future is decided. Time slowed. Elias lunged. A blinding golden light erupted from the vial. Lirae screamed. The world rippled, as if space itself was bending, warping, shattering. And then, everything stopped. The war, the soldiers, the burning sky. Elias was floating, in nothingness. And in front of him, a vision, a child, neither human nor Sylvarian, but something new, something that would reshape the universe. The hybrid had already changed everything. Elias's eyes widened. He understood now. This wasn't about war. This was about evolution, and it had already begun. Epilogue. A new dawn. When Elias awoke, the battle was over. The ruins of Valros 9 were silent once more. The warships were gone, and beside him, Lirae stood unharmed. But her eyes were different, brighter, glowing. Iliassos slowly sat up, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. What happened? Lirae touched her stomach, where the vial had been. It's gone, she whispered. Ilias's blood ran cold. What do you mean, gone? Lirae looked at him, and then she smiled. She wasn't supposed to survive. She wasn't supposed to carry this child. And yet, here she was, running, hunted, carrying a secret that could change everything. A child, half human, half Sylvarian. A miracle, a curse, something the High Council would burn the universe to erase. But they made one mistake. They thought she was alone. They thought no one would help her. They didn't count on him, a scientist, a fugitive, a man who never wanted to fight until now. And now he will stop at nothing. Not to destroy the future, but to protect it. Because what grows inside her, it's more than a child. It's the beginning of something new. And the galaxy is not ready for what comes next.